Happy Monday, everybody. So, depending on where you are watching this right now, you may or may not be able to see that we have finally added video to the podcast. Now, the ultimate goal is to have that on Spotify as well. If you're watching on YouTube, then you're definitely seeing this. But that's going to be if future Noelle was able to figure out how to add video or not, if you're seeing it on Spotify. But regardless, one step at a time, we are working on it. We're excited to have a foot in the door as far as video goes. The ultimate goal is obviously to have more fun stuff going on back there, and I'm not sure if this is the setup that we're going to keep. If you have any suggestions, leave it in the comments down below, because I'm not certain what to do next. And thank you guys for bearing with me and growing with me. I really appreciate it. But enough of that. Let's get into the actual episode itself. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have also noticed this, but it seems to me that our society has pretty much gone full retard. We have health organizations stating that men who believe themselves to be women, who have pumped their bodies so full of drugs and hormones that they have started to produce a liquid, for lack of a better word, out of their breasts, and that liquid is in any way comparable to the breast milk that a woman produces after she's given birth to a child. So that could be the whole episode, but unfortunately it's not. Ann Coulter apparently has superpowers because she was able to observe patterns in the media. And I guess by today's standards, that is a superpower. So without further ado, I am your host, Noelle. This is Just Say No. I'm really excited to be here with you guys in video form today. Let's get into it. Currently a letter from the University of Sussex University Hospitals NHS Trust got leaked, and this letter stated that milk produced by a man who takes a plethora of drugs and hormones is comparable to that which is produced by a woman after giving birth to a baby. So they state that through taking progestin, am I saying that right? Who knows? Not me. Which is a drug that mimics the female sex hormone progesterone, and taking that in combination with other drugs such as, doperidone, correct me in the comments, which is a drug that is intended for women who are having difficulty producing breast milk on their own. But I think that we have established by this point that as a society, we generally don't care about off-label drug use. So who really cares? Now, after taking these drugs and presumably more, some men have been able to produce, as previously mentioned, liquid from their breasts. And the NHS Trust has claimed that this is comparable to what a woman would produce naturally after giving birth to a baby that they had grown in their womb for 9 months. This is obviously a very similar this is obviously a very similar process. So naturally the outcomes are also going to be similar. I feel like having video really demonstrates the bitchiness that I intend to come across, just on another level. So that's exciting. Now, thankfully, the NHS Trust did receive a load of backlash, which to me demonstrates that the majority of Americans are sane. We have our heads screwed on we have our noggins screwed on well. Now, it also demonstrates that it is actually a very small subsect of the population, those who have typically spent the majority of their adult life in academia, who are willing to get on board with this shit. I don't know what else. I don't know what else to call it. Now, most Americans are appalled and confused, as they should be, because the bottom line is we are once again performing experiments on our society's most vulnerable children, in this case, infants, babies, in order to affirm people's delusions. So that's fun. We love that for us. Go team. So a man who believes himself to be a woman is still a man. He is still male. There is no hormone. There is no drug. There is nothing on God's green earth that is going to change that fact. So because of that, there's no man that can produce breast milk that is going to have the same nutritional value that is found in what is produced by a mother. Is what it is. Be mad. Be triggered. It isn't going to change that fact. And once upon a time, there used to be this thing called a code of ethics that we used to adhere to in scientific experimentation because, make no mistake, friends, this is experimentation. When you do something that you don't know what the result of that thing is going to be, and you do that thing perhaps to find out what the result is going to be, that's an experiment. And we're experimenting on babies, so that's sick. But there used to be code of ethics, right? And the number one code was generally do no harm. To demonstrate this the best that I can think how, let's take a field trip back in time to around the 1920s. Now, there was a doctor, John Watson, and he wanted to build upon Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning, which essentially states that through negative or positive reinforcement, you can train a person or a dog to modify their behavior. So he decided to expand upon this in a very famous experiment called the Little Albert experiment. So in this experiment, he and his assistant, Dr. Reyna, took a 10-month-old baby, and what they would do was they would show him a fluffy white stuffed animal, and simultaneously they would make a very loud and frightening noise, so that eventually when little Albert would see white stuffed animals, he would immediately be afraid. He would start crying, have fear-like reactions, because they had continuously made jarring, frightening noises. So when he saw these white stuffed animals, he was expecting there to be a frightening noise that followed. Now, years later, this experiment started to arouse controversy for two big reasons. One, the fact that little Albert was an infant, therefore unable to consent, and there could be the argument that parents consent for their children, and you see this argument made a lot in things such as child transitioning, but that is a road that we are not going to go down today. The second reason is because the results, this fear that they instilled in this baby, they found to be irreversible. So they were not able to undo this phobia that they instilled in this baby. And so that kind of, goes against the do no harm thing. Ultimately, this experiment was deemed so unethical that it led to the creation, among other experiments, it was one of the experiments that led to the creation of the Ethical Review Board. So what that means is today what is supposed to happen is if somebody wants to conduct an experiment, they have to submit a proposal to the Ethical Review Board for them to then deem if it is ethical or not. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The point here is, though, if the Little Albert experiment was deemed this unethical due to being unable to reverse the effects and also the fact that little Albert was a baby, then in what world would it be ethical to give an infant milk that came from a man whose body has been so chemically altered that it is doing something that it would not otherwise naturally do? How is that ethical? That's what I want to know. I would like to see the evidence for that, because that's what we're doing, and that's sick. Is that something that a sane society would engage in? I would obviously argue not. And in fact, I would take it a step further and say that not only is that something that a sane society would not do, that is something that only a deeply sick, twisted, corrupt, foul society would do. That's what I would say. That would be my conclusion personally. And while we are on the topic of ethics, a good ethical question to always have in the back of your noggin is, just because we can, does that mean we should? Just because we can chemically alter a man's body to do something that it is not naturally intended to do, does that then mean we should give that to a baby? Does it? I have doubts. I have doubts about that. And it truly does come all the way back around to a baseline of narcissism. You have to be a pretty selfish and twisted person to risk a baby's potential development, future prosperity, all in the name of affirming your own mental illness, because that's what you're doing. Make no mistake. This benefits nobody. This benefits absolutely nobody except for that man and his sick, twisted head. And that's just the reality. I said what I said. And there are for sure going to be people out there who are going to hear me say that, no, maybe it isn't healthy to give a baby this chemically altered milk, and say that I'm transphobic. And that's fine. That's fine. I've been doing this for years at this point. And what I have learned is that people fling words such as transphobic or racist or what have you in order to get you to shut up, in order to get you to just quit fighting and go along with the flow. Because once upon a time, it used to be deeply offensive to be called racist, especially when you know that you're not. I would say only when you know that you're not. I'm assuming that racists don't care about that, but my point stands. But they have so overused this word, these words, that everything is racist, everything is transphobic. Everyone who says, hey, maybe men shouldn't compete against women in boxing, they're TERFs. So if everything is these things, nothing is these things. They have unilaterally stripped these words of any meaning at all. And I guess that really does make sense, because their MO does truly seem to be to redefine every single word that we use. But another rabbit trail we're not going to go down. But the bottom line is that I know I'm not racist. I know I'm not transphobic. I'm not homophobic. I don't hold hate in my heart for these people. Just because I disagree with certain practices, or just because I choose to adhere to biology and biological facts, does not make me any of those things. We are moving on to another story, ladies and gentlemen, and that story is the shooting that happened at the Kansas City Super Bowl parade a couple of weeks ago. For weeks after the shooting, we did not have much information on the shooters. And then when we finally did start getting some information, they were saying that they couldn't release the identities because they were underage. So going off of this, a few months ago, we talked about media manipulation, and we're going to circle right back to that, because that is precisely what this is. I would like to start off the segment with a clip from Bill Maher's show a few days before the identities of these shooters was released with Ann Coulter.
We have some idea.
What?
If it were a white man shooting, we'd know.
Well, we don't know. But they haven't...
That's how we know it's not a white man. I can tell you that much.
You think they were repressing that reporting?
They wouldn't tell us about the transgender woman that shot up the Christian school for what, like a year? San Bernardino out here. Remember the crazy terrorist Muslims? That's when I first noticed, they're not telling us who it is. It's not a white male. The longer they go without telling you, it's not a white male.
Okay, well, for this one, for right now, as of Friday night, February 16th.
We know.
We don't officially know. Okay, you have special powers.
And apparently she does in fact have superpowers, because a couple days later it came out that the shooters were not white men. No, they were two black men. So let's dissect that, shall we? So here is the deal. Let's backtrack here for a second before we get to the actual identity of these shooters, to the point in time when they were telling us that they couldn't tell us the identity because they're underage. Now, that's peculiar. That's strange, because I seem to recall that Kyle Rittenhouse was 17. And I seem to recall that Nick Sandman was 16. So, what's up with that? Oh, right, I'm sorry. They're white, so obviously different rules. Now, this is actually irrelevant, because the Kansas City shooters were both legal adults. One was 18 and I think the other was 20 or 21 years old. So that was actually just a lie. Does that surprise anyone? No. So then you have to ask yourself, what's the real reason that they took their sweet time releasing those identities? And one comes to the conclusion that it is the simple fact that it just did not adhere to the narrative. And you see this continuously over and over and over again. If you go back and watch, I think it's episode 1, media manipulation. Go watch it because we discuss this exact thing. And I have some more examples for you guys. Do you remember a couple weeks ago, a woman walked into a church with a 6-year-old and shot it up? Did you hear about that? I don't think you did because it wasn't covered very much. It might have something to do with the fact that that woman was a part of the LGBTQRS group and had a pro-Palestine sticker on her gun. But that's just a guess. Do you remember last year there was that shooting in Nashville and it was a trans woman? It was a young lady who conducted the shooting, and a year later we still don't have that manifesto? Well, I stand corrected. We have a couple pages from the manifesto thanks to Steven Crowder and his team. And from that manifesto, this was a deeply anti-white people crime. This woman hated white people and Christians, but that doesn't serve the narrative. Can't have that. Remember in 2021 when a man drove through a Christmas parade and killed a bunch of people? That didn't get covered very much. We didn't discuss that very much. We didn't discuss his motives or who he was. Now, I don't have the same superpowers as Ann Coulter, but I'm going to go ahead and guess that it's because he was a black man. I'm just going to go ahead and guess that. Do you see the pattern? Are you seeing the pattern? If you're not, it's okay. I'll keep going. Don't have to convince me. There was a college student a couple of weeks ago named Riley Lakin, and she got murdered by somebody who was in our country illegally. Do you know his name? Who killed George Floyd? Yeah, right. So a college student gets murdered by someone who's here illegally. We're not going to discuss that. But George Floyd, a career criminal whose crimes included things such as robbing pregnant women at gunpoint, he has a statue in New Jersey. Right. The January 6th shaman, we can all think of his face, right? And his great sin was what? Being led through the Capitol, escorted by police, and saying a prayer in the Senate chambers? Right. And I know we already talked about him, but he's a pinnacle example of this. Kyle Rittenhouse. He acted in self-defense, and one of the people he killed was a convicted child molester. But he had the great sin of being a white guy at a BLM protest. So the odds are not in his favor, are they? The point here is whose faces can you recall? I guarantee you can see the shaman. I guarantee you can see Kyle Rittenhouse. I promise you can see George Floyd. What about Riley Lakin? What about the guy who drove through the Christmas Day parade? Do you see the point? Do you see the pattern? And I could keep going. I have more examples here, but I feel like I'm drawing it out a little bit. This is a well-established pattern, and Ann Coulter does not have superpowers for noticing it. She just doesn't. But we have a couple more things to get to on the Kansas City front, one of which is the fact that the Kansas City mayor, Quinton Lucas, called out the Missouri governor for describing the perpetrators as thugs, stating that this was racist and discriminatory vernacular, right? So let me read you the definition of thug. It is a violent, aggressive person, especially one who has committed a crime or is criminal. Call me crazy, but that sounds like an accurate description of somebody who goes into a parade and starts shooting. Another interesting point is, and I could have missed it, but I don't feel like I heard the same kinds of calls for gun control after this shooting as you usually do. And again, I could have missed it, but I just don't feel like I heard it. And that could potentially have to do with the fact that the gun used in this crime was stolen. And it turns out that there is no gun law that's going to prevent that from happening. Because it turns out that criminals are going to find a way to get a weapon. They're going to find a way to get a gun. And if you ban guns, they'll just hop on over to Mexico across our wide open border, as you guys so have it, and get a gun there and bring it back. Make that one make sense. 2 + 2 = 18. All gun laws are going to do is prevent law-abiding citizens from having weapons to defend themselves against these criminals. And I think that this case really highlighted that. I think this case really highlighted that fact because this weapon was stolen. There's no red flag law that could have stopped this. There is no outright ban that's going to stop this. There was nothing that could have stopped this because he stole the gun. If he's willing to steal it from his grandma Mimi, if he's willing to steal it from his whoever, you think he's not willing to drive a couple miles, drive a couple hours and go get a gun? Okay. Further tying into the media manipulation, typically after a shooting, we get a very dramatic photo of the gun, right? Meant to draw on the emotional appeal of seeing something scary like an AK-47 and thinking, oh dear, this gun was used in such a heinous crime. We didn't get that. And now, I'm not Ann Coulter. I don't have superpowers, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's because it was a handgun. That's not confirmed, but I'm going to assume, I'm just going to guess that it's because it's a handgun. And guess what? That doesn't serve the narrative. Because what do they always say? That they want to ban assault weapons. Which, by the way, can we define that, please? Because as far as I'm concerned, if I drove a steak knife into your neck, that would then be an assault weapon. So can we be a little bit more specific, please? But I think that they are intentionally vague. However, for the purpose of this argument, we're going to narrow it down for them and assume that they mean assault like rifles or AK-47s or what have you. Keep in mind, I am not a gun expert. I don't know what the difference would be if there's a different, I think assault rifle is also a broad term, but Lord help me if I know. The point here though is that if this was a handgun, then a ban on assault weapons or assault rifles also wouldn't have stopped this because handguns are the ones that we're supposed to be allowed to have, right? What they are trying to ban is anything that has like a magazine that carries 57 rounds because that's really, really scary. But this wasn't that. So every single thing about this shooting, there is no gun law that would have stopped it. So that's a lot of negativity. What is the solution? I stand on the fact that this is a mental health crisis, that this is a crisis of our society, because it's not like it's new that Americans love guns, right? That's not new. What is new is the mass shootings over the last couple decades. So I want to change the perspective and think about what's changed about us as a society over the last couple decades that has contributed to these shootings, because the guns haven't changed. The guns didn't start firing themselves. The people who own the guns, something changed with us. And I personally would think that this could be the breakdown of the nuclear family that is bound to create instability. This could be the increase of prescription drugs. I didn't look into this before the episode, but I would be willing to bet that there is some sort of correlation with the increase of prescription drugs and the increase in shootings. I'd be willing to make that bet. And I just feel that there are other things that we need to be looking at before we jump to the gun. Because this incident, as sad and tragic as it was, highlights greatly that gun control wouldn't have stopped it. It still would have happened. That is all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you enjoyed. If you are watching on YouTube, I hope that you enjoyed having the video component. And as I said at the top, this is a work in progress. We are not even close to being done, but it's a start, and I'm very excited about that. So wherever you are watching, please do the thing that you are supposed to do to help me out. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you are on Spotify, give me a rating and a follow. All of my social medias are in the down bar down below. I would really appreciate if you checked me out over there. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will talk next Monday. Bye.